Hello and welcome to the ASA Curriculum Changes University webinar. I'm Tiffany Tatsumi, the Academic Administrator for the Society of Actuaries and your moderator for today's session. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available after the event to registrants and our academic contacts. We will give a brief presentation and then we'll move to your questions for the rest of the webinar. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so via the button marked Q&A in your Zoom toolbar. The Q&A feature will be available for the duration of the webinar and will read your questions aloud during the question and answer session following the presentation. Joining me to present today are my colleagues, SOA Senior Education Staff Fellow Stuart Klugman and SOA Education Staff Fellow Scott Lennox. Now, before I bring them on, I'd like to talk a little bit about our long-term growth strategy. We have identified 6 critical issues facing the SOA and the actuarial profession, which must be addressed by our strategy. The first of which is the rise of data science. Data science has emerged as a discipline distinct from actuarial science and is more formally being incorporated into industries where actuaries work. For example, data scientists are disrupting the insurance industry, so actuaries in turn must embrace data science as a tool without necessarily having to become data scientists themselves. The field of data science is our competition for top candidates, so we must distinguish actuarial science as offering something that data science cannot. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is changing the nature of work. For example, automation, machine learning, and cognitive agents will change how employers leverage technology. This means less work for actuaries, especially at the entry level, and there's risk that data scientists will assume some responsibilities traditionally held by actuaries. This changes the balance of skill sets that are important to employers. There's more emphasis on EQ and AQ skills. Those are emotional quotient and adaptability quotient skills, such as judgment, creativity, leadership, and problem-solving skills, and less on the technical prediction skills like analyzing data for patterns. Credentialing and skill development is also changing. The focus has shifted more to skills attainment rather than broad degrees or long-term credentials. We've seen less employer support for candidates through credentialing processes and for attendance at major meetings, and there are new competitors in the online course space. There's more interest in customized, stackable credentials in skill-based education, which you will see reflected in our new curriculum that we'll learn about in just a bit. We will also work to strengthen member, candidate, and volunteer engagement by changing how we engage with them, accounting for generational and technological change. Millennials and Gen Z now account for the majority of our members. They have a different relationship with the SOA and engage with us differently than do baby boomers and Gen X. As far as growth is concerned, we see the most future growth to come outside of current core geographies in the US and Canada, as the insurance industry grows more rapidly in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. Insurance products and regulations vary widely by country, which will lead to different requirements for actuarial knowledge and ultimately may require a new operating model. And finally, we are increasing our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the organization. By 2027, the US candidate base will no longer be majority non-Hispanic white, and our international member count will be increased. Along with strengthening our diversity programs already in place, you will see us weave our DEI strategy into other existing initiatives and develop new forms of support. You can view the SOA's DEI statement and other resources on the SOA website. And now it is my pleasure to invite Scott Lennox to join us to talk about the ASA curriculum changes.
Thank you, Tiffany. Okay, so let's look at the pathway through the graphical representation, and all this information is posted on our website as well, so you can look at it and get more information there as well. So this graphic shows the comparison of our current pathway on the left to the new pathway on the right, and the colors represent the different components that are part of the pathway, the VEEs, the exams, projects, we have e-learning modules, and also the seminar. So I'll talk about the details of many of the changes on the next few slides, but we always get asked, well, why are you making these changes? Didn't you just make some changes? Well, kind of an extension of changes that we've made in the past that we're making these changes to the ASA curriculum to meet employer and market demand for actuarial training, and it's designed to improve candidate retention and increased engagement. So we continue to hear the predictive analytics component that was added recently. You know, that's been well received by the industry and candidates as well. So we're hearing more of that. We want more predictive analytics. The other thing that we're hearing is the actuaries continue to need more of those soft skills, the adaptability quotient skills, the emotional intelligence quotient, the EQ, AQ skills that Tiffany mentioned as well. So these are the important skills that we continue to hear actuaries need to have. And so we're incorporating more of this in our pathway to help make sure the candidates are successful in their careers as an actuary. The key decisions that the board approved in June are listed here. The LTAM and STAM exams are split into the Fundamentals of Actuarial Mathematics exam and the Advanced Long-Term Actuarial Mathematics exam and the Advanced Short-Term Actuarial Mathematics exam. We're also adding the Advanced Topics in Predictive Analytics exam or component. It's more of a project-based. The IFM has been removed. Much of the IFM exam has been removed, but the component the component pieces that make up IFM are really staying. Much of the IFM material was already covered in FAP, and some, you know, we'll need to make sure that that's continued to be focused in the FAP as well. The other topics in IFM, one of them is moving to the Advanced Long-Term Actuarial Mathematics exam. And the others that are currently in IFM, they will be covered in the fellowship tracks, in those particular tracks that need those skills more specifically. And so really the material, it's a more efficient distribution of where that material should be covered and at what level and what candidates need to know based on the specific tracks that they're selecting. We've added 3 micro-credentials, and Stuart will talk about that later. And of course, you know, some components have been added and some have been removed. The overall goal here is to not increase travel time. Okay, so let's go through some of the details on what's staying and what's changing. Exams P and FM. So there have been some topics that have been either reduced or removed, and this will possibly allow earlier access to Exam P for candidates. Essentially, the material that's being removed is the material that students might receive in their 3rd term of calculus. And so this might allow them to write Exam P earlier. With limited changes that are being made to this exam, we'll still be able to have instant results for this exam. For Exam FM, some of the topics have been removed, some of them have been transferred. So we're reducing some redundancy and eliminating some outdated content there. And again, the limited changes here also allow us to continue with instant results for this exam as well as Exam P. What material is being removed? When is the syllabus going to be out there? These are the questions that we're being asked, and the answer is that this is the top priority for those committees. So those committees have been told the first thing that we need to get is, as a finalized syllabus, we need to put that information out there. Obviously, everyone on this call is interested in getting that information, but more importantly, the candidates need to know that information, and also the committees that need to coordinate with Prometric in terms of the material that's staying and the material that's going. That needs to be done as well. So the sooner they get it, the better. We're talking in terms of number of weeks that's going to take rather than number of months. So it's not going to be, you know, several months. It's going to be several weeks. So. The exam FAM, or Fundamentals of Actuarial Mathematics, this is going to be the basic topics that are in the current LTAM and STAM exams. This will be a multiple choice exam format, and we're going to have an even split of long-term and short-term topics on this exam. The advanced versions of the long-term and the short-term exams The goal here is to have the same format for both exams. They will both be written answer exams. They will both be the same length of exams. And so what's going here is, of course, the advanced topics that you would likely see in the fundamentals of actuarial mathematics, but a more advanced treatment, plus some new ones. I already mentioned the one that's being added to the advanced long-term exam that's coming from the IFM exam. Transition rules. The first part of the transition rules are very easy. These components, although they maybe some minor changes to some of these components, what candidates have credit for today, they'll have credit for tomorrow. For LTAM and STAM, this is where we've been getting a lot of questions from candidates, a lot of specific, I have this exam and that exam, what will I have credit for in the new world? So if candidates have neither STAM or LTAM by the spring of 2022, they'll have no credit for anything going forward, and they will need to get both FAM and one of the advanced exams, their choice as to which of the advanced exams they write. If they have LTAM by the time the transition occurs, they will get credit for the advanced long-term exam, and they will get credit for the long-term half of the FAM. And so what's outstanding for them will be the short-term half of FAM. If they have, and the same works, it works the same way for STAM. If they have STAM, they'll get credit for advanced STAM, and they'll get credit for the short-term half of FAM, leaving the long-term half outstanding. The short-term and long-term halves of FAM will be available for those candidates who, because of the transition, are missing a half of FAM, and that'll be available until June 2024 for those candidates to get the rest of that component. Otherwise, candidates will need to write that entire FAM exam. It will not be offered as two halves. It will only be offered the half components for those candidates who, because of the transition, are missing a half. And if, of course, they have both LTAM and STAM by the transition, then they've completely met the requirements for the new pathway, and there'll be nothing outstanding going forward. The other one we get a lot of questions on is how does the transition work for IFM and new advanced topics in predictive analytics exams? The new pathway requirements are met by either having IFM or having the advanced topics in predictive analytics. So both requirements aren't required, just one of those two. So if a candidate does not have IFM by the transition, of course, they've got no credit for anything going forward. They do have a choice of taking either IFM or the advanced topics in predictive analytics. Now, the IFM will remain in place, but only until November 2022. So if a candidate wants to get this requirement by taking IFM, they have until November 2022 to fill that. If a candidate does have IFM by the transition, then it provides the credit for what they need going forward. So again, that new pathway requirement is met by having either IFM or the advanced topics in predictive analytics exam. So nothing is outstanding for those candidates. And we expect the advanced topics in predictive analytics to be open for registration in January of 2022. Some of the current FAP introduces candidates to the actuarial profession. What we're doing is creating two new modules to do two things. One, bring some of the FAP module content earlier in the pathway for candidates, and two, develop level appropriate EQ/AQ skills. So as a result of these two new modules, FAP is being revised to be 5 modules instead of the current 8 modules. In terms of timing, and you know, all of this information is on the website, so I'm not going to go through every single row of this slide, but so you can refer to that online. But this is the timeline that the board approved in June, and it is what the exam committees are in the process of implementing right now. So again, this is posted online. So in summary, the various changes are made to make the pathway more efficient for candidates. We've removed some outdated content and redundancies. We've improved the arrangement of topics and incorporated the micro-credentials and expanded areas of AQ, EQ, and analytics. And with that, I will pass it on to Stuart.
I think you're actually passing it to Tiffany.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna, I've got a few slides before we bring Stuart back on. So I'll be talking a little bit about the changes to exam requirements for the SOA university recognition tiers. So given the changes to the ASA curriculum, we're also making adjustments to the requirements for these tiers as well. All these changes are going to be effective January 1, 2024. So first up are the changes to the CAE requirements. So VEE, that's easy, that's unchanged. CAEs must have approved courses for all 3 VEE topics. 80% is still the threshold for CAE status for exams, and these universities must have coverage for at least 5 of the SOA preliminary exams, and these exams must include SRM, FAM, and either ALTAM or ASTAM. CAEs will be expected to meet the new curriculum requirements by their first annual review application or 5-year application due after January 1, 2024. Any new applicants will be held to current requirements, but must also demonstrate that they will meet the new requirements by that date. Next up is UCAP AC, or Advanced Curriculum. So the VEE requirement is unchanged for this as well, all 3 VEEs, just like CAE. The exams do differ, however. UCAP ACs must demonstrate coverage of at least 4 SOA preliminary exams, and that must include either ASTAM or ALTAM. Again, current UCAP ACs must meet these requirements by January 1, 2024. And like with CAE, any new applicants will be held to the current requirements, but must also demonstrate that they will meet the new requirements by that date. And finally, UCAP IC, or Introductory Curriculum. This one's easy. The new requirements will be identical to the current requirements. So that's approved courses for at least 1 VEE topic and demonstrated coverage of at least 2 SOA exams. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring Stuart back up to talk about some recognition choices.
All righty. Okay, thanks, Tiffany. A few more things about the changes that have been made. So these go alongside the pathway, and the first one is recognition choices. So when Tiffany introduced this presentation, she talked about what folks are looking for and ways to keep members or prospective members engaged with the Society of Actuaries. And one of the ways that the board has decided that that could be done is to introduce micro-credentials. So as it notes on the slide, pathway components that as a group represent a distinct set of knowledge and skills. Items that if you leave the pathway, you could take on your resume, might impress an employer either inside or outside the actuarial profession. And so one thing you should note in this diagram is all 3 of the micro-credentials that we've created use parts of the revised ASA pathway. And one of the motivations for the revision of the ASA pathway was to accommodate micro-credentials like these. So anyone who pursues a micro-credential will have credit. All the items in their pursuit of the micro-credential will provide credit towards an ASA if they choose to go on and earn one. And if they're on the path to ASA, they will sort of automatically get these micro-credentials as their time goes on. So I just want to briefly talk about what the 3 are about and what they represent. Pre-actuarial foundations represents the sort of what we call enabling skills, the things you need to know to learn how to be an actuary, but have no particular actuarial content to them. The only exception will be the pre-actuarial foundations module that will come at the end of that micro-credential pathway. It will have a P and FM as prerequisites. And we'll introduce our candidates at that stage to the actuarial profession, what it means to be a professional, and to what some basic actuarial problems are. And as was also mentioned, it will start incorporating the AQ, EQ components that have been deemed important by employers for our candidates. One of the things they fear at times is that the early part of the pathway, and P and FM are good examples of that. Being multiple choice math exams, our candidates are to some degree conditioned to believing that all problems have a uniquely correct answer, and your task is to deduce what that is. And that doesn't either promote the ability to deal with ambiguity or send a signal that in actuarial practice, that's what you'll be doing all the time. If you complete those 5 boxes and add 4 more on the right-hand side, then you can receive the Actuarial Science Foundations micro-credential. So here you do learn some actuarial skills. A person with this micro-credential could work in an actuarial support role, for example. Back in the day, sometimes folks at this level were called para-actuaries. Sometimes today they're called actuarial technicians. A lot of companies have numerous folks serving in a role like this, where they're not doing actuarial work or qualified as actuaries, but they are supporting the work of the actuaries. And then the third one is for any actuary on our pathway who completes the 3 analytics exam, they would get the data science for actuaries micro-credential, indicating that they have mastered that set of knowledge. And so with that, let me go on and say just a couple more things. Again, I've hit many of these milestone markers. They count. They're a logical grouping of exams. We'll go one more slide. Mention they incorporate both modules at the end of the first 2, incorporate AQ, EQ, provide a mark of progress. And very important to note that earning these micro-credentials does not make you a qualified actuary. You can't sign statements of actuarial opinion. That will continue to be reserved for those with our designations of ASA and FSA. And my last slide on this topic is the plan is when you've completed those components, it's an automated process. You receive a recognition that you have earned that micro-credential. They don't expire. They don't need to be renewed. You can carry them with you the rest of your life. Think of it more like a college degree than a designation of membership. It's something you've earned that indicates at that point in time you'd acquired a certain bit of knowledge. For 2 of the micro-credentials, they do give you the option to join our affiliate membership program, which I will be describing next. So again, if you can go back to Tiffany just for a moment. Just a reminder, again, it's an option. So when you complete the micro-credential, you receive recognition, you have your badge, you can put it on your resume, does not make you a member, does not convey any rights or benefits or obligations on the individual who's earned them. But for 2 of the micro-credentials, you get the option to add a membership category. So now let's go on. So the other main announcement is the creation of affiliate membership categories. So the board approved the concept some time ago, but only now are we putting it into action. And so we're going to have 2 levels of affiliate membership starting in October of 2021. Which is actually coming up pretty soon. The free affiliate membership will be open. So this affiliate member category is open to anyone. It's essentially a matter of registering. There will be some benefits associated with it, but it's not a full-blown membership category. And then next year, as candidates can start to earn the micro-credentials, if you have one of those 2 listed micro-credentials, you can become a professional affiliate member. So this is a second level of membership. It will carry some obligations, some small dues component, and some benefits. Some of the details are to be worked out, but it could, for example, include a code of conduct as a professional affiliate. The name itself implies that you have some professional responsibilities. So we will be announcing more about all the details of that in the months to come. But again, that category will be reserved for those who have earned the either actuarial science foundations or the data science micro credentials. And so that was a quick overview of the other things that the board approved that go along with the new ASA pathway. Tiffany, are you going to do the wrap-up slides?
Yeah, I'll take it from here, Stuart. Thank you. So we continue to provide updates on the curriculum changes through our extensive list of frequently asked questions with answers available on the SOA website, along with detailed transition rules and timing. So if you have any other questions or feedback that you'd like to share, you can do so at membercoms@soa.org. And with that, why don't we take your questions? So it is time for Q&A. Thank you so much to our viewers that have already submitted their questions. And just as a reminder, you can submit your questions by clicking the Q&A button that will provide you with the opportunity to type and send your questions. All right, let me go ahead and turn this off so that we can have all three of us front and center. So why don't we go with our first question? So this one is going to be about the modules. So is it expected or desired by the SOA that coverage of the material in the pre-actuarial foundations module and the actuarial science foundations module be added to the university's curriculum?
My expectation for the most part is that it will not be part of the curriculum. Candidates will do about a 40-hour online module to acquire this and submit an exercise at the end, a take-home exercise similar to the end of module exercises that are currently employed with the FAP course. So this is something they can get on the side. You know, we encourage, and we'll have more out on what AQ and EQ skills are. And we obviously both encourage universities to supply those skills in general. And we actually know that a lot of the universities we talk to, that's part of their mission as well, that they have the opportunity by being face-to-face with your students, giving them projects to work on and discussions and presentations, that you have the ability to incorporate those skills into your courses as well.
All right, and a follow-up on the modules. So what kind of preparation is required for students or candidates before attempting the modules, and about how long do they take to complete?
Okay, so I hit the first one. We generally target a module at 40 to 50 hours. And like our FAP modules, they're self-contained. So you approach, we have a formal prerequisite of P and FM for the first one, and then SRM and FAM added on for the second one. So we want our those attempting the modules to have that prerequisite knowledge. But the modules themselves are self-contained. You work in the online screens. It tells you what to read, what to work on, and leads you up to the end of module exercise.
All right. So this is kind of a question about timing, and I think it was Scott. Maybe you had mentioned this before, but it wouldn't hurt to have a reminder. When will we have the learning objectives and the syllabi for the new exams?
Yeah, so we've kind of we've kind of already stressed out our exam committees, telling them we need them right away. So we don't want to push them too hard on that. Obviously, I think they're the first focus. Is they need to make sure that you know, all the details are worked out. The source material is sufficient, that matches with the syllabus documents, and then of course we need to coordinate with Prometric for those CBT exams that get immediate results. So that's kind of that first priority, and so we know that they're burning the midnight oil getting that done. So as soon as that'll be done, we'll be posting that. So you know, that's what we're working for, and we're continuing to push them, but gently push them, I would say.
All right, great to hear. Okay, does the SOA recommend students take exams and VEE in a particular order in this new pathway?
So the graphic on the first slide that I went through kind of is read from the bottom up, and so you know, we do think that that's the most optimal way for candidates to proceed through that. Obviously, there's, you know, the only rules that there are if there's any firm prerequisite rules for any of the material, but without that, candidates are free to go in whatever order that makes the most sense. A lot of times, you know, students will go through the components in the order that they take them in university. So, you know, I think the students will continue to follow that path, but really, and the pedagogical way is really to follow that graphic from bottom up. So take the bottom components and then work your way to the top components.
I might add to that, again, other than the prerequisites for those two new modules, we continue our policy of not setting formal prerequisites through our exam system. However, it will continue to be the case that any given exam would be indicated at its homepage what the question writers can assume for prior knowledge. So an exam today, such as LTAM, can make it clear that it's assuming PNFM knowledge for people who are taking that exam. But that doesn't mean they're required to pass the exam. It's just a warning that that knowledge is expected.
And I will add that those graphics that we're mentioning here are available on the SOA website. I think it's still on the home page. There's a button to access the page that contains those graphics. All right, next question. So the SOA has made significant changes to the syllabus in 2018. The upcoming changes occur just 4 years after those changes. How comfortable are you that there will be no future changes over the next 10 years, say?
You know, the only, what's that saying? The only constant is change. Yeah, I think, you know, I think it would be naive to think that there are no changes coming in the next 10 years. The actuarial profession evolves, and its goal is to stay current with what's happening in the industry, what the employers need and require of their actuaries. And as that evolves and changes, our curriculum must evolve and change to meet those needs. It's very much like the changes that are being made here. The biggest focus on here is that market demand, that what employers are looking for in their actuaries, looking for more predictive analytics. We need to add a component for that. So needing to add more soft skills, we added a component for that. So obviously, we're not looking to make change for the sake of change, and it's not our goal to disrupt anybody's lives, especially going through the rigor of and the pain of actuarial exams. And Stuart and I know that from past experience. So obviously, we try to keep any disruption to a minimum, but it does need to evolve and it does need to grow with the profession.
All right, so here's a clarification question about the new exam. So do candidates have to take just one of ALTAM or ASTAM? Is there a difference in the resulting credentials? And let me pull up the actual graphics, so maybe that'll help as well.
Yeah. So the answer is only one is required, and there will be some candidates through the transition that will have both LTAM and STAM. That's fine. Going forward, only one of those advanced components is required. Now, how that connects and how that lines up with the fellowship track, obviously the long-term would line up better with the life insurance track. The short-term would line up better with the group health track. But it's not a requirement. But what is a requirement is for those fellowship tracks is that the fellowship components will assume that candidates will have that knowledge. And so if someone does take a long-term exam and goes into a short-term fellowship track, then they may need to brush up on that short-term information and knowledge. They will not need to go and pass that exam. They will not need that component. The associateship requirement is met by having either the advanced long-term or the advanced short-term. So hopefully that covers that question.
All right, next question. If exam P will be removing topics typically encountered after a Calculus 3 course, does that mean that continuous bivariate distributions will no longer be on exam P?
I think we want to be careful here. As Scott has said, we've not yet released the syllabi. And we've gotten several questions about, what will be on, what from IFM is moved to LTAM, when will the FAM syllabus stop, referring to chapters from a textbook. And we'd rather not speculate here on this call on behalf of the exam committees that are working on that. So, I'm sorry to say that I think we're better off waiting for the final word, coming, we hope, in the reasonably not too far future. Tiffany, I saw a question go by, and since it relates to that, it's one thing we want to point out in talking to many schools. For the most part, if you have a current sequence that covers all of LTAM, it will pretty well, again, with maybe a topic here or there, cover the long-term part of FAM and the advanced topics. If you currently are covering STAM, your students will be pretty well set for the other half of FAM in the new advanced topics exam. And so that education will be very beneficial to them. And we've even heard from many faculty members that at least short term, and that could be for the next few years, the plan would be to continue to offer courses in that model, not create a separate FAM course just for that exam, but rather move their students through the topic, both basic and advanced. If you're doing that in a course, it may actually be more efficient educationally to just do the whole package at one time.
All right, let's check out what other questions that we have here. All right, so if accessibility and entry into the profession is a goal, has the SOA discussed at all in moving up the pass mark, the pass percentage for PNFM from the 40% it currently is to closer to 50%, which would make it more rigorous but not discouraging, as many students from the profession after their first exams, employers heavily weigh one exam pass for internships?
Well, I think there's a couple ways you could look at that. I mean, the board, I think, would like to raise the pass rate, but there've been no directive to ease the standards for passing. One of the things they are talking about, but yet to decide if they want to move in that direction, is providing more resources for candidates to be successful on the exams. And so, as you know, particularly for PNFM, for some time, the pass mark is preset. So the pass rate is just a consequence of the pass mark that has been set. Again, you could lower it, but I don't think there's a lot of appetite for doing that right now. But that doesn't mean we can't find ways to help our candidates be better prepared to hit that pass mark when they take the exam.
Okay, so this is a question about UCAP status. So if we have to offer a LTAM or a STAM, it seems we'd also need FAM. So if we currently offer SRM and want to keep to 4 exams, we would have to change from offering SRM to FAM. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think the current rule is, the current requirement is to cover either LTAM or STAM. And so what we wanted to do in the transition is try to make this as easy a transition as possible and have the rule cover either the advanced long-term or the advanced short-term. And the reason for that, and the reason we went that way instead of requiring FAM, because a lot of universities will either cover LTAM or STAM and not necessarily both. And we didn't want to disqualify any of those, any of those universities that maybe currently only cover one of those two. So by making the rule that you have to cover either the advanced long-term or the advanced short-term, it makes a very easy transition, because if they currently meet LTAM or STAM, then they will meet the advanced requirement going forward. So that was the thinking behind sticking to the advanced rather than requiring FAM.
Okay, so this question is about the pathway, new pathway in general. So which exams or components provide training for the EQ and AQ requirements?
So specifically, the two new modules that go with the 2 micro-credentials, the pre-actuarial foundations and the I always forget exactly what it's called, but the other one, the second micro credential. So the where is it on that slide? Oh, to the far right. Yeah, and I have to move my little screen that shows our pictures. The pre-actuarial foundations module and the actuarial science foundations modules. So those 2 new e-learning module components that are being added that link to those micro credentials.
I might add, we've always had a bit of it. The FAP course has done some education in that regard. 2 problems with it were there wasn't enough, and it was also coming late in the pathway to ASA, and we wanted to move that education up earlier. So those 2 new modules do that. The other thing that we've also worked on that we've already done, and we'll do a little more of with this, is I don't know if everyone recalls, but when the written answer component was added to the LTAM exam, it was MLC at the time, the notion was, and we think it's been very successful in that regard, is that by switching away from multiple choice tests, we're also starting to, in our formal exams, asking candidates to explain things and justify and not have display a bit of deeper understanding than can be done with a multiple choice question. Now we're finally reaching a goal we set some time ago to have short and long term equalized. And so with the short term advanced exam also having a written answer component, we'll bring those qualities to that exam. And again, both the new-ish predictive analytics exam and the new advanced topics exam will be all exclusively written answer as well. So another opportunity for candidates to explain things, communicate, justify, and deal with having to make decisions in ambiguous situations.
Now, you've answered the first part of this next question, both you and Scott. So I'm wondering if maybe we can just move on to the second half of this question. So regarding the micro-credentials, how do you see them being used within the industry? What sort of applications?
So I'll try a couple things there. So within the industry, the one that the use that I can foresee, and we did talk to employers before launching this, and they did show interest in this notion. It's possible that the pre-actuarial micro-credential may, in some circles, become the benchmark for an entry-level job, or an easy way for a candidate to communicate that they have that background and the ability to learn more. As I mentioned when I was talking about them, the Actuarial Science Foundations one, corresponds fairly closely to this actuarial technician role, and I do know a lot of companies employ people in those roles. The question would become: are they interested in having them do some exams and professionalizing them in some way? Again, noting that completing that micro-credential makes them eligible for the professional affiliate membership category. So there might be some encouragement for employers to do that. It's not unlike the Certified Actuarial Analyst credential that we introduced a while back in cooperation with the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. And I suspect one of the reasons that credential did catch on in the US is that it was apart from our pathway. So there was no way to work on those exams and then articulate your way to ASA. And so as something completely separate from what the SOA does, it may have appeared to be less appealing. You do a lot of work, you pass a lot of exams, and then you get something that's, not really being an actuary, because all the actuaries over at the next desk were doing the big boy exams, and maybe people would not respect that by using the same exams in in this micro-credential. I think there's a possibility of, at least of some employers saying this is a really good way to get some of the folks who have those roles to demonstrate it. And if you're in that role, it also may give you an opportunity to again, put on your resume, if you look to change employers, not only have I been doing these tasks and doing them successfully, I've got this micro-credential from the SOA as well.
All right, switching gears a little bit back to exams. So some of my students have just passed IFM. If they're not able to earn their ASA before the rules change, is there any benefit that they can have for having passed that exam?
I think there's probably two benefits. One, it meets the requirement for associateship, right? So they need either IFM or the advanced topics and predictive analytics component. So one, that's a benefit. And the other benefit is that if they're going to be going into a fellowship track that relies more heavily on those topics, then they're probably well prepared going into the fellowship. So those are two good benefits, I think.
And I might add sort of, there's a second question that wasn't asked with that one, and that is, when we did the 2018 transition, there was a little bit of weirdness around the PA exam and the notion that the fact that if you got your associateship without PA and then didn't get your fellowship in time, you would have to backfill the PA exam to get your fellowship. And there's nothing like that in this transition. You can use your IFM forever as a requirement to get your ASA, and you can move on to get your FSA unimpeded, just doing what's currently in front of ASAs who want to move on. Now, that does mean you're missing, I'll say, the benefits or the knowledge of the ATPA exam. What I expect will happen is after we get that out, that content will shortly thereafter be available as a continuing education program for any member who wants to learn that material, but would then not take an exam at the end. Or it might be a certificate program where you have some sort of assessment at the end, but not at the same level of rigor as we would do for something that's on our pathway to ASA.
All right, switching gears back to micro-credentials. So are there modules, exams, or applications that a student will need to fill out in order to earn a micro-credential?
So our understanding is that it will be automated. So the registrar will do a monthly run and look for anyone who in that month has completed the 5 components or 10, whatever the components are, 3 components, and anyone who has met those requirements will automatically be issued the micro-credential.
Does the SOA plan to offer anything similar to the predictive analytics certificate for already credentialed actuaries that will help them learn the ATPA material if they want to?
So I think that goes with what I said previously. Some of the ATPA material is actually in the current PA certificate, but we'll be revamping the PA certificate in next year. We're introducing a new certificate in a couple of months called Responsible Use of Data, and some of that material overlaps with ATPA. And so one of the things we'll have to look at is whether, how we want to carve out what's in ATPA, but nowhere else in our continuing ed certificate programs, and figure out what to do with that.
All right, next question. Has there been any coordination with the CAS regarding the elimination of IFM, which they currently accept for their exam 3F requirement? Or does this mean there will only be 2 exams, P and FM, recognized by both societies?
So there's no there's no joint agreement with the earlier exams. There's no joint offerings for exams. These are all SOA exams, PNFM and IFM and so on. And I think currently the CAS does allow credit for those exams toward their pathway. So we've had meetings with the CAS and we've informed them of the various changes, and their response was that they will be looking at their syllabus, but we're not in the loop of what they're planning to change with what they're going to give credit for. So the answer is we don't know what they're going to do.
All right, shifting gears again now to UEC, that's University Earned Credit. What courses in the new syllabus will be eligible for UEC, or do we know yet?
Okay, so on that, we were purposely vague in the original UEC announcement because we knew the board was considering these changes. As we've also communicated, there's now an oversight committee that's been formed to solidify the rules for UEC so that we can announce them in a couple of weeks for how the system will work and what universities need to do to apply to be able to offer UEC. But so now that we have these new exams in hand, the obvious question is which ones from that diagram will be available. So the oversight committee has been working on that issue. They're pretty close to a recommendation. They're actually meeting tomorrow, have another meeting tomorrow to continue to finalize recommendations. So we're a couple weeks away on that one as well from going public with which exams have been selected for UEC.
All right, now a question about LTAM. So I've seen this question phrased in a few different ways coming into the Q&A chat. So I imagine that, many of you are kind of in the same boat here. So we have an LTAM cohort group starting a 2-semester course sequence next month. So is it possible to have an additional LTAM sitting in the fall of 2022 rather than just ending things in spring 2022 to give students a chance twice to pass instead of just the once?
So I covered this when I went through the slides that the timeline was part of what was kind of approved by the board, and so the job that's in front of the committees now is to implement that timeline that was approved. So it's an approved timeline, so there's no possibility of change as far as we know. I can give some background as to the thinking behind that particular change was the FAM. We wanted to. There was a desire to have FAM first available in November of 2022, and so rather than create an additional workload on the committees that support STAM and LTAM, we made the first offering of the advanced LTAM and STAM exams in 2023, so that they could. They wouldn't be doubled up in terms of creating FAM and another STAM and another LTAM to finish off. So that was the thinking behind the timing. But as far as we know, that's etched in stone, and that's what the timing will be.
All right, so we talked a little bit about when syllabi will be available, but how about the predictive analytics syllabus? Will there be a new one posted on the SY website for that?
So are we talking about the new advanced topics exam? Because we post the predictive analytics one. That's pretty much staying the same every 6 months. For the ATPA exam, we've talked about the 4 topic areas that it covers. And I want to make sure I get those right. So the advanced topics areas that will be covered with more details to follow are working with data. So the PA exam pretty much assumes that the data arrive. There may be some things to do to clean it up a bit, but how you work with databases, how you merge data, how you get it all shaped up so you can run a GLM or a random forest on the data. That's not in the PA exam right now. So that's one of the 4 new areas, is working with data. The second one are data and model ethics. So this is, become a big deal. It's it's always been a deal, but it seems to be a bigger deal, particularly around the world as governments are putting in more restrictions and asking for more demonstrations that the models we use do not discriminate or introduce unintentional bias. So we want to add material on that to make sure our candidates are starting to be geared up to build models that meet those requirements. The third one is advanced analytics models. We're still narrowing down the list, but for example, some things we don't cover in the PA course that could be added would be things like k-nearest neighbors, additive models, linear mixed models, neural networks, Bayesian MCMC. So we have to get the size right to be an exam worth of topics, but we're looking at topics like those to be the sort of advanced models to be added. The fourth area is model explainability. This goes a little bit with the model ethics. How do you explain what your model does? How do you take the input and output of a random forest or a neural network and try to explain to someone, how do you get from here to there? And so what's actually happening within the model without trying to be a technician about how the model actually does things. And so there's a variety of techniques out there. Some of them are in the PA exam, like a partial dependence plot, but there's more advanced methods such as Shapley values that we're going to want to bring to our candidates to help them display the output from their model and help explain it to whoever's going to use the model. So those are the topics, but we're still refining the learning objectives that would go under those four areas. It will be delivered in a modular form, not by textbook. And our vision is for this one, it will be a take-home exam administered similar to the FAP final assessment. So not a proctored closed book exam as we currently do for the PA exam.
Okay, next question. So as a follow-up to the timing that we had been talking about, to make curriculum changes for the 2022-2023 academic year, we have to submit paperwork by the end of December. Are syllabi likely to be available with enough time to make that happen?
Well, I think we expect to have draft syllabus documents out there within several weeks, three weeks, give or take. So I think the timing should work out. I mean, I don't know what individual universities, what each individual university follows, but if your timing is late fall, shouldn't be a problem.
Yep, I agree.
Great, that's good to hear. All right, so another question. We have an introductory data science course that is pretty close to covering the syllabus for exam PA, but is done in Python and Jupyter rather than R and RStudio. How committed is the SOA to R and RStudio for that PA component?
Well, I'd say we're committed until we're not. And I think we're hearing, that when we set up the exam to start delivering it and working on it 4 years ago, it seemed like R and RStudio were more commonly used in universities, and we had a better chance of having candidates come in with some experience with it. Clearly, one of the risks, one of their challenges of any exam that relies on a computer package or programming language can't persist forever. So I don't know when the date is. One of the things we've been talking about with the general officer over the SRM, PA, and soon to be ATPA exams is considering a revamp for 2023, particularly of the PA exam. That would be a good time to coordinate it with the other two exams in a more efficient manner. We still need to kind of solidify the ATPA exam first, but that would strike me as an opportune time to at least review the programming language that's used. So they're already at work on the 2022 PA exam and thinking about what that's going to look like. So, changes can't come that quickly, but 2023 is when we're targeting, perhaps looking at some, as a good time to review the PA exam in particular and what we do in it, and that would be an appropriate time to look at the language being used.
If students are considering the CAS route, is there an incentive to earn SOA micro-credentials?
I don't know.
You
have to ask them.
I mean, again, at least for now, the components of that, the 4 non-module components are still recognized by the CAS. So the addition would be whether that capstone module at the end of it would be viewed as a beneficial learning experience. And we have no idea what the, as Scott mentioned, we don't know what the CAS will make of it. Maybe they'll think it's a wonderful thing and say they would like their folks to do that too. But totally up to them.
All right, so now back to some of the curriculum changes. And Scott, you may have mentioned this in your section. How come IFM can substitute the ATPA, Advanced Predictive Analytics, when the material for both courses are completely different?
They are, and which is why it's the rules or the requirements for ASA is to have either of those components rather than it being worded as IFM gives you credit for ATPA. IFM does not give you credit for ATPA. It just means that to get ASA, you can either complete it through either one of those components. Those two topics are very much unrelated. And so that's why there is no link between those two, other than we've added a new component and we've removed one component. And so what we wanted to do from a candidate's perspective is not add anything extra to what they would need to do. So any candidate who today has IFM would say, hey, you've just kind of added a new component for me, and yesterday I didn't have that component to get, and you've just made my pathway longer. And again, I talked about that in the presentation as well, is that we really did not want to make the pathway any longer for any candidate, and so that's why that rule was put in place. It's very unique. I don't think we've ever had one quite like that before, which is why it's a little unusual, and people are getting easily confused that IFM gives you credit for ATPA. It does not give you credit.
Yeah, it's as Scott says, it's a bit extreme, but we also wanted to make sure that anyone who'd invested in the time and energy to pass IFM didn't lose that credit in any way. So if you look at all prior transitions, they weren't necessarily as extreme as this, but it's often the case that you wound up, I'd say getting credit. And I don't want to, as Scott said, we're not call it getting credit for ATPA. So think of it as waiving the ATPA requirement. We've done things like that before where there's not a one-to-one match. A good example would be VEE Applied Statistics gave credit for VEE Math Stat and exam SRM, when if you did VEE Applied Statistics, at best, you got half of the exam SRM content, but we gave full credit for SRM because we didn't want candidates to have to redo material if at all possible.
All right, I have a couple of questions for clarification about the new pathway. So first, is passing FAM required before you take ALTAM or ASTAM? Is it a formal prerequisite?
No. So again, we really, for the most part, shy away from prerequisites. We had one for a time where SRM was a prerequisite for PA. That just was eliminated this year to, again, be more consistent with our philosophy of not having prerequisites. But again, the knowledge would be assumed in the exam, but we won't check to see if that knowledge has been demonstrated through passing the actual exam.
Great, and that answers the second prerequisite question that I had, so you beat me to it.
Okay.
All right, so moving on. If a university has limited courses that it can offer, would you suggest removing the IFM course now? Will doing this close career options for some students?
So I normally don't like to use this placeholder. That's a great question because we're not saying in any way that finance topics, whether it's corporate finance or derivatives or investments, aren't valuable. So we encourage, when I was back in teaching, we encouraged a lot of our students to take extra finance courses. We thought if that's what you like to do and it's helpful, it'll keep other doors open for you. As you do your career plans, it gives you other options. We know students today like to collect a lot of different majors and minors and certificates as part of it. And it's still valuable stuff for a lot of the actuarial pathway. Back, again, think of my own experience, back before there even was an MFE or an IFM, when all that material was much later in the pathway, we just said, look, if you're going to go that direction, if you're going to work for a life insurance company or want, like that material, take a bunch of finance and investment courses. It'll make your life a lot easier when you get to that point in your actuarial education. But it's the same way you might be encouraging students to take extra data science courses these days, or economics, or anything else that they might find useful. And I've used this analogy before, and some people didn't like it, but I'm going to throw it out there again. When we stopped testing linear algebra on our exams, most schools still continue to require that as part of the math sequence for getting the degree. And it's still a good subject to know. It was just recognized that other than some basic matrix manipulations, we just don't do much, to have a whole course in linear algebra and all the ancillary topics that go with it. So long ago, the SOA decided to stop testing that subject, or even saying it's an important prerequisite. So those are, so it doesn't mean it isn't valuable. It does mean our board has elected not to test it at that stage.
All right, so we have a little less than 10 minutes left, so I'm going to get through a few more questions here. Can you explain the difference between data analytics and predictive analytics in general?
No. And I mean, we've been asked that a lot. What's predictive analytics? What's data science? What do all those different terms mean? The one thing, I think there is a bit of separation regardless of what you call them. At least when I've looked at a lot of data science programs at universities, they tend to be more data than analysis. So much more about getting the data, working with the data, getting it ready for use, and actually not a lot of, say, machine learning, analytics techniques to actually build predictive models using that data. So for sure, our PA exam focuses on the analytics part, on taking data that's already in hand and in pretty decent shape, and building a model to answer a business question using that data. So what we're trying to do with the ATPA exam, as I mentioned, is part of that is to bring in data manipulation as part of it. And again, I'm kind of hoping I won't get stuck as we build this into the same dilemma that was just asked about R&R Studio, but that's as well, you're going to have to learn SQL or some equivalent database language. We're running into those questions a lot when we do data visualizations, or we're going to ask candidates to use Tableau or Power BI or something else. And, we're kind of hoping at least we can avoid those issues. It was awfully hard to avoid the issue of to do the PA exam without having any programmer language or package for candidates to use.
All right, this should be a quick question. Is there any fee for applying for a micro-credential?
No. That's my understanding. That again, it'll be, we hope it's a little more substantive, but we're anticipating, I think, more like a digital badge, which people have earned. I have a Fitbit, and a couple of weeks ago, they sent me an email, a Minions badge for something I had done. And we hope this is more substantive than that, but I think the concept is the same. It'll trigger, when you've earned it, it'll trigger an email, and it'll go and it'll be on your SOA transcript and something you can attach to your resume.
Reminds me, I've got to find my charger for my Fitbit. Lost that long ago. Let's see here. So there's a couple questions about CAE that have come in. So 80% is that mark that they need to meet for coverage for CAE status. Can CAEs hit that 80% mark with material scattered across multiple courses?
So there's two different levels here. For CAE purposes, we've historically not been concerned with where the material comes from. We only ask that the courses be regularly offered so candidates actually have access to that material. For the UEC program, there will be a limit to be announced as part of the package from the Oversight Committee for a particular exam, how many courses can be used to cover it. And that's to be able to, not have to scrutinize 5, say, different courses to find out where the material is, because then you also run into the problem where if you're using that many courses, there's probably a lot of material in the courses that don't relate to our exam. And then it becomes more difficult to sort out whether candidates are actually learning the stuff we've decided to care about versus what's in their classes.
Plus the bookkeeping requirement, if we're trying to keep track of the marks that candidates got in 5 different courses and different components and pieces to find out whether they got enough in total to get UEC credit or not. So we're trying not to overburden the bookkeeping requirements of the universities.
All right, another question about CAE status. So currently PA is not included in the exams eligible to be assessed for the CAE program. So are we going to include PA and ATPA as part of the evaluation process for CAE status?
We haven't planned on it for now, but I think that's a worthy topic to take up with the committee that oversees the CAE program.
All right, we have time for one more question. Are there any plans to allow university faculty to, say, have view-only access to the ATPA module material without needing to take the exam?
So I think that's another great question to which we don't have an answer today, because I think there's also the same question would apply to the new modules that go with the micro-credentials as well. And so, that's something we will have to work out probably at the same time we have to work out the pricing for a lot of these things as well.
All right, with that, let me go ahead and share the last slide of the presentation. Thank you everybody for your questions. We really enjoyed having the opportunity to answer those on the webinar. Thank you also to Stuart and Scott for presenting with me and to Gina behind the scenes. This concludes the webinar. If you do have additional questions, you can certainly send them to us at the SOA at membercoms@soa.org. That's the email address you see on your screen, or to me atttatsumi@soa.org. For detailed program descriptions and FAQs, you can visit the SOA website at soa.org. We will be providing a link to the recording to all registrants and university contacts when that is made available. And I've also seen a question come through regarding the Pathway PDF that's available online on the SOA website. It's good to view, not so much to print. I do have a printable version that I'll also distribute via email, so you can check for that. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we really hope you enjoy your day.